Jackie Shaw iBroad presents
Zoomterview.
an Administrators Unite production.
We're back with my best friend Tracy Flanagan, who has been an accounting professional for many years. We both started out in 1988 working together in the accounting department for a canning company. And since then, Tracy's had a wealth of experience working with different companies and is a wonderful accounting professional to talk to because unlike me, she's had experience working with really big companies. So what's the biggest company you worked with? Like how many employees? Best guesstimation. Like was it like 10,000 or?
There was probably about 1,000, maybe a little bit more. That was including the people. It was a company that built power lines, which is electrical substations and putting up the electrical poles and running electrical wires. And that there was probably a little over 1,000 employees.
That's a lot of coworkers. Like you're never going to know their names. That's for sure. So what did you do there? What was your position?
I was accounts payable specialist there was 5 different sub companies underneath the umbrella company. And I did all the accounting for one of the sub companies, which was actually the largest of their sub companies, where I probably paid out probably about like 1.5 million a week in checks that I would send out. Yeah. Probably entering about 600 or 700 invoices a week. Yeah.
Holy sh. So, but you took care of their AP and their AR for that division?
Just AP.
Just AP for that division. So you were in charge of one fifth of the AP for this company of 1,000 people.
Yes.
And how many coworkers did you have in the accounting department?
There was probably about 15 people in accounting. A lot of that, of course, was just supervisors. And there were some people that specialized in the tax aspect of it, because that was obviously a big part of it. And then there was one person doing accounts receivable, basically. And then one other person for each of the other little sub companies, and then kind of overseeing supervisors above all of them.
What did the supervisors accomplish?
Meetings. They like to just have meetings.
Mm-hmm.
The tax department did a little bit more work than the other ones, but for the most part, they were supposed to be overseeing us, but they basically, from what I could tell, they just had a lot of meetings about what we should be doing or shouldn't be doing without actually doing any physical work. Where I was going home and having to ice my hands at the end of the day because I'd done so much data entry. And the supervisors just like to they just like to schedule a lot of meetings.
Yeah. I wish I would have wrote it down because I really want to like quote it in books and stuff. But I experienced this yesterday with Intuit. I was on the phone with a tech support person and she wasn't hearing me. And she at the end of the conversation, she in a very demeaning way said, "Change is hard." And I'm like, "Listen, lady," I'm like, "change is what I do. Every client that works with me is going to experience change." I said, "I have no problem with change. Problem I have is that you guys broke a very good accounting platform, which was T-Sheets. You broke it and you made it so it's going to be a lot more work for the end user."
Right.
And I felt like what I was experiencing was what I just saw in like a documentary or read in an article, which is the advanced tech team is telling her just to shut me down and go away, because that mid-level management's job is just to keep all of the upsetness away from the C-suite,
Right.
right? Like they just don't care, right?
Yeah.
It's just, it was very clear to me in the moment that they just don't care. And it was a Friday afternoon. I'm going to call them again. But so you had how many, if you counted up when you were at the big company and you did AP for one company and you were icing your hands from all the data entry, which is just insane. How many supervisors, managers were stacked on top of you? So you had like your supervisor, or was there like multiple people that were supervisors that were, yeah.
Yeah.
So about how many people do you think were stacked on top of you?
Probably 3, maybe 4 that
Yeah.
were all supposed to be there to review my work, but none of them ever actually did, because they early on when I got there that they didn't need to, because I knew what I was doing. But it was still, you had to get authorizations from like 3 other people above you before you could cut a check, and
Yeah.
what I was cutting 300 or 400 checks a week. That really bogged down the time that it took to actually get anything accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I would think, with that kind of layering of supervision over the top of you. That's the kind of stuff that they need to streamline, right? They're like trying to streamline our data entry by using bank feeds, which sometimes causes even more problems.
Yes.
I mean, we use bank feeds for some of our clients, don't get me wrong, but it can really make a mess. And that's how we make our money. I don't want to make my money that way. I want to teach people how to do it right and set it up correctly in the first place. How long were you at that giant company where you were doing AP?
3 years. 3 years
And
there.
what kind of raises, if any, did you see in that 3 years? Like, did you get like $1 over 3 years? $2?
I started there as a temp, and because I was paying the invoices, I knew how much they were paying the temp agency versus what I was getting. So I thought when I was hired on full time that it would be closer, and it wasn't. They did not pay well at all compared to what I had come from. It was probably about $5 an hour is what I'd finally gotten in raises from the starting money. And they didn't believe in salaries there, which was good for me because I was working 70 hours a week. So I was getting overtime for it. So that was nice. And part of it is because I did ask for raises.
Yeah. So you asked.
Weekly. Yeah. I would go in and I would have my backup. This is all of the new work that I've taken on, all of the new responsibilities I've taken on. I deserve this. And luckily, because I was really good at what I did, they agreed with me. So when I left it, I still wasn't where I'd been before I came to that company, but it was much better than what I'd started at. There.
Yeah. So you took a pretty big cut in pay and then recouped some, but not all.
Right.
In the years that you were there. What's the smallest company you've ever worked for? How many employees was that?
It's the one I'd been at before I went to the big company at Telco. There was only 2 of us in accounting, and there was like 5 people basically in the company total. So, and I was there for 12 years, and that I got paid really, really well, but I was also kind of on call 24 hours a day, basically, because like I said, it was an international company. So if I needed to talk to somebody in Ghana or in Turkey, I had to call at their time. So
yeah,
a lot of the work I did remotely and did work from home. And I mean, it was just a great place to work. You could show up there in your sweatpants. You could work whatever hours you wanted to work because it was international. So you didn't have to work set business hours. So one of the reasons I really like that company, but it was the phone industry, and nobody makes phone calls anymore on landlines. And it was basically a landline based company. So they had gone out of business finally.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that was a pretty, I mean, except for being on call, which can be kind of fun, like you said, right? Getting to talk to people all over the world. It sounds like at the small company, you were much more respected, like they showed respect
Definitely.
to
Yeah.
you for what you do.
Right.
Yeah. And appreciated you and
Yeah.
paid you accordingly.
Yes, correct.
Do you feel like with the megacorps, it's just like a churn and burn? Like they don't really care about attrition. They're fine if they're going to pay crappy and they think that anybody's going to sit in that AP seat, they'll find a person that's willing to work for that money, and if they leave, who cares?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was so insulting because they did, and it was the controller who said that, and he said it repeatedly. He's like, it's just accounts payable. That was their attitude towards the department. It's just accounts payable. I heard that multiple times while I was there, because I would get upset about something another employee was doing that was slowing my work down, which I don't care. If somebody wants to sit there on the internet all day at work, that's fine. That's the company's business, whether they have an issue with that or not. But if it's going to affect my job, that's when I have a problem with it. And because I had worked for such a small company where we didn't have much money, I had to, find ways to bring our electric bill down, find ways to cut corners to try to keep the company alive. So when I went to the big company and I saw how much money was being wasted, I was offended. It killed me to see the stuff that they were spending money on. And so when I first started, I thought I was doing a great thing. And I'd go to the controller and I'm like, look at this, because they provided soda and snacks for all of the employees. And they were getting it delivered from Office Depot. You know how much Office Depot charges for a 12-pack of Coke versus if you send an employee over to Walmart to get a 12-pack of Coke? I mean, it was $3 versus $9. So I went to him. I'm like, oh, we can be saving all this money if you change the way where you're buying this stuff from. And they literally laughed at me like it was the biggest joke they'd ever seen. They're like, so? I'm like, do you know how much money you're wasting doing it this way? And they literally laughed at me continuously. And so I never felt respected at that company at all, because I was just a cog. I was just an accounts payable person.
Yeah, which is hilarious because a huge chunk of the profit and loss is based on accounts payable.
Exactly.
Like, how do you get a freaking financial statement without accounts payable? This is the expense. Yeah. And I think that that's what really bothers me, is this idea of, instead of them being like, we're grateful that you have concern about the company and are looking at ways of saving money. Like they could have expressed gratitude for the fact that you cared, but instead they laughed at you. I mean, that
they literally laughed in my face like I was telling them a joke.
Yeah. Because it's pretty easy to do the return on investment if you like send somebody to the store, which sometimes going to the store is more expensive. Like with the remodelers, the carpenters going to the Home Depot 3 times a day is not efficient. But if you're buying like cases and cases and cases of soda, that $6 delta for one 6-pack is going to go a long way to pay for a human just to walk across the street and get the stuff.
Or even get it delivered.
Or even change. Yes, or even change where they get it delivered. Like Safeway would probably deliver it and be a lot cheaper.
Exactly. Then Office Depot.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Holy cow. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for telling us about what it's like for a large company. And I will say that I am sure that every megacorp or big company, I'm calling them megacorp, but I know there's companies that have hundreds of thousands of people. But what the IRS considers a small business is people that have less than 500 employees. And I think you would agree that that's a pretty terrible definition when
Yes,
there's so many companies out there with 5 employees.
exactly. Yeah.
So I feel like they need to have another delineation there and have a micro business. Like, who's
Yeah.
a micro business? Because they say they want to support small business, but then they define it in a way that's not really small to
Right.
those of us that are in the trenches.
Yeah. Like I would consider even 100 employees, I would consider a bigger
Me
company.
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot more to it. But at the end of the day, like I said, I'm sure there are some megacorps that are fine to work with, but your experience is what I expected to hear, which is you're just a cog, lack of respect. They don't care if you quit, because they'll just find someone else, low pay and very little respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though they did really, really want me to stay there when I left, because they knew how much work I did, but that was me personally, but there was so many people's input in it that the controller got outvoted because they didn't want me working remotely. Even though I'd proven repeatedly that I could be, I think if you have an employee that does care about where you might be wasting money, I think you should value that employee, because that means that they're dedicated to the company. They're looking out for best interest, and then to laugh at them for somebody who's trying to look out through your bottom line. It was insulting.
It's very disrespectful in general. That's like somebody, like you're out for a walk and somebody's like, hey, your shoe's untied, and you're like, what is wrong with you? That's so stupid. Can't believe you even brought that up, right? I mean, okay, great. You had said that you actively went in and got raises. So in the next episode, I'm going to ask Tracy what she did to prepare for requesting raises, along with what mentoring and schooling that she's received with all of her different positions that she's had in accounting. So thank you, Tracy. We'll be right back with another episode with Tracy Flanagan.
Yay!
This has been a Get Organized Entertainment production. If you'd like to see more videos, go to administratorsunite.com.